Welcome to another How to Succeed podcast, the show that helps you get to the top and stay there. I am your Director of Community Engagement at Sandler, Mike Montague, and my guest this week is Chris McDonell, a longtime Sandler trainer from Baltimore. We're going to talk with him about how to succeed at using Sandler's Upfront contract to increase rapport. The podcast is copyrighted by Sandler Systems, Inc. and protected by U.S. copyright law. Sandler is the worldwide leader in sales, management, and customer service training. You can find out more information at Sandler.com. You can share this podcast with somebody that you think needs to hear it in sales or leadership. And of course, if you haven't already, click that subscribe button. We'll get started here with how to succeed at using Sandler's Upfront contract to increase rapport. Chris, welcome to the podcast. Welcome back, I should say. Tell us a little bit about the upfront contract and how we use that with rapport to kind of create better connections with our clients and prospects.
Well, thanks, Mike. First of all, it's great to be here. It's great to be back on the podcast. At a very high level, when I started thinking about this topic, in the Sandler system is obviously bonding rapport, upfront contract. And so in a way, we're kind of reverse engineering it a little bit when you think about it from a standpoint of upfront contract helps create ultimate bonding and rapport. So we'll talk about today is, not the bonding rapport as far as the typical getting to know you type things that of course will always happen mostly naturally, but how the upfront contract can be that solid foundation, obviously for qualifying, et cetera, but very importantly, bonding and rapport.
Yeah, I think when we teach this to our clients, we kind of talk about the different disc styles sometimes, and that for direct people, the upfront contract is the bonding and rapport. They want to get right down to business. So any talk about the weather or the sports teams or the kids is really just distracting from where they want to go. Other styles that don't like surprises, they like to know ahead of time what's going to happen to them. And same thing with those detail-oriented people that want to make sure that they're prepared. This is the agenda for the meeting and they know what's going on in what order, and they can kind of let down their guards. And then the one that's tricky, in my opinion, and I'll give you a crack at it, is those outgoing people that are super friendly and they don't like to stick to an agenda. Your upfront contract is your chance to make an agreement with them that they will stay on track during the meeting, and it helps hold them accountable, even though they might not enjoy this part of the meeting the most. Is that fair?
It's very fair. And speaking of that, I'm basically 50% I, 50% D, right? So, I mean, that's kind of where I go, right? And so if I'm with someone that's a high I have to be very careful in all the right reasons that we can have an hour-long meeting and all of a sudden it could be 55 minutes in and we're just like, doing that typical I stuff like anyone would, right? And it's fun. But did we get to the meeting at hand, matter at hand? Most likely not. Now, sometimes is that okay? Well, it all depends, right? When you think of it that way. But from a communication standpoint, we have to realize that when we communicate, especially with a high I, they do want to get down to business. They just most likely not sure when. It's like, when do I turn this off and turn the business hat on? So the upfront contract can kind of help us get there.
I like that. Now, I feel like this is going to be a bit of an advanced lesson, which is great. We've covered upfront contracts before. So if this is one is over your head, just go back and search, upfront contracts or contracts in our playlist. And there's a couple of other episodes that'll get you started. But that being said, I wanted to set this up, Chris, and ask you about maybe just the common mistakes people make. Why are we doing this in the first place? Make sure our head's in the right spot here to talk about why would we even want to use a contract? What's the upfront part all about? And kind of the right mindset for bonding and rapport before we go too much further.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And really, I think the premise, and we'll talk about this, there's 6 C's that we've been talking about lately in the upfront contract that helps with bonding and rapport. And I think really we can actually start with the first one, to your point, and that would be just overall clarity, right? Clarity. So thinking about this from a standpoint of a prospect immediately says, Mike, why should I work with you? Or what makes you better than blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a
How
lot
much does it cost?
Right. How much it costs, all these different things. Let's go. Now it could be, again, a D style hitting an I style, all these different things happening. But from a clarity standpoint, that starts off immediately with unclear objectives, right? Salesperson comes in, prospect wants something. And the upfront contract, how it helps with bonding rapport is you can look at the prospect and say, say if I'm the salesperson, you're the prospect, Mike, as much as I want to tell you why others have decided in similar situations to work with us, I really have no idea if we're a fit to work together at this point, if those solutions there would make sense in your world. And I guess I'm just a little bit uncomfortable with that. Would it make sense for us right now, just kind of back up a little bit, just kind of form kind of why we're meeting today, ask each other some questions, and we can really determine where this thing should go. Does that make sense? And just with that type of clarity, it's hard to argue that point. No matter what style the prospect is, there's some factual evidence in there. So you know what? That kind of makes sense. Don't give me something that doesn't make sense for me.
Right. I think that's huge for just getting on the same page of what you're doing in that meeting and why you're there. Makes a ton of sense to clarify everybody's roles, what we're trying to accomplish, what their priorities are. All of that is great. The second one that comes to mind for me, I think, is your sixth C, which is getting to the outcomes. If we decide up front how we're going to spend our time and what the next steps are, it makes the whole rest of the meeting easier. Like you said, a lot of times salespeople get into they're shaking hands, or we just want to meet each other. We want to feel it out, see if there's anything here. And that loose agenda doesn't really lend very well for good decisions. Nobody really knows what's on the table, and that makes it really tough.
Well, to your point, and that leads to confusion, one of the C's, because and misdiagnosis, which definitely doesn't help with bonding and rapport. Right. I mean, in order to build trust with that prospect and build trust with each other, if you just jump in and just start answering the questions right away, or we're better because of this or this, that, and the other, wow, misdiagnosis, applying the solution to the wrong problem. I mean, it's like there's millions of analogies around, doctor visits, right? And someone just say, here, doc, here's what I need. And doctor, okay, sure. It's just, it just doesn't work that way. But sometimes in sales, we kind of do. But it's just like that doctor. The doctor looks at us and says, makes us feel comfortable and has the right bedside manner, then we feel comfortable, right? And so it really does go back to, we want to eliminate as much confusion as we can. And by establishing upfront contract and bonding through that, the prospect looks at us because they already have this preconceived notion. What's going to happen? What are they going to sell to me? And that automatically makes them uncomfortable, right? So, and we'll dive deeper as we go.
Yeah, and I just realized that maybe we missed, and we use the Sandler buzzword because we've been doing this for over a decade each. That we should probably just talk about the upfront contract itself. So we're talking about doing 4 simple things here today. It's deciding, why are we here? What's the purpose of the meeting? Yeah. What's their agenda? What were they hoping to accomplish? What were we hoping to accomplish on the call? And then what decision or outcome or next step is going to be decided by the end of the call. When we do those 4 things up front in the meeting, it helps so much as we go further. And now we can talk about why we do each one of those steps and in that order, and sort of what those benefits come for it and how that really increases the relationship that we're built.
Totally. And when you just said that, it just, when it increases the relationship, then I feel comfortable. Another one of the C's, right? I feel comfortable. And I remember many years ago, I've had my Sandler business for 14 years. This goes back 20 plus years ago when I was in the corporate world. One of my mentors told me that you have to make sure that you enable any customer or prospect, this is probably 25 years ago or more, to feel comfortable and confident. I remember that, comfortable and confident. I'm like, what do you mean? And he told me the story. He's like, all right, imagine you picture the closest person in your life, right? Whatever that person is. At that time, I pictured my wife, right? So I'd ask you to picture the closest person in your life. You got that person in your mind right now? Okay. Mm-hmm. Imagine them giving you brain surgery the next day. How you feeling about that?
Not really good. No.
Not good, right? Unless that person is a brain surgeon, you're going to be like, no way, it's not going to happen. So you have a lot of comfort with that person. You feel good, they're great. I mean, the person I want to be with, but not much confidence in that aspect. Upfront contract, bonding rapport, you can feel comfortable. We could be bonding. You and I could be like, oh yeah, great. Maybe we went to the same school or this, that, and the other. We like the same sports team, blah, blah, blah. But then all of a sudden, if I just kind of jump into it and don't use an upfront contract, then all of a sudden later you might be like, well, what's going on here? I mean, is he just kind of like, is this really apply here? Is this for, where's this thing taking both of us? Right. So it helps bring comfort and confidence together.
Yeah, and I think that takes us to our behavior talk, and really the next C here too, which is it offers a whole lot of other things that we can do than the right thing at the right time. So if we say, hey, we're not going to ask you to buy from us today, we can put that pricing discussion off to another day after we do a diagnosis of the problem or a better discovery here. We can find out what they really want to accomplish and what we want to accomplish. And it creates this nice game plan for our behavior inside of the call, right?
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned the key thing. If we're not going to work together today, right? If the answer is truly a no, well, there's plenty of stories out there where people have actually blamed prospects for not moving forward. It's like, how can they do that? Right? I mean, imagine that, right? But you think about it, it's to be able to preserve that it's okay if we don't move forward. Maybe it's not now, maybe it's down the line. And you think about it, we had this class about several weeks ago with a client. We talked through this from a standpoint of 6 months ago, 12 or 6 months from now, 12 months from now. It's amazing when you follow up with a prospect. If it was a no then, and you follow up and you had awesome bonding and rapport back then, and they understood there was no pressure, the odds of those deals closing later just go through the roof.
Yeah.
Bonding rapport.
Yeah, I think it also just, for so many people, takes the pressure off of that conversation for both the buyer and the seller. So if you have a long sales cycle, or there's going to be some sort of demonstration later, or they have a decision-making committee, anything that extends a sales cycle beyond a single call, then it helps to say that and say, hey, I know we're not going to get a deal done today. There's no pressure to buy anything. I'm not going to try and sell you anything, but hopefully by the end of our conversation, we can decide if it makes sense to bring in, our support teams, or go to the next step, or whatever that sales process happens to be for you. Then everybody can take a deep breath and we go, okay, well, now we have plenty of time. We don't have to try and cram everything into this meeting. All we have to do is cover X, Y, and Z to make sure that we can get to the next step. And I think it's huge.
So huge. And that's one of the C's, continuance, right? Moving it forward, moving it down the path. And especially as you talk, I guess this was the same meeting, client meeting, where the salespeople, several of them, are moving from selling to mid-sized clients to selling to elephants, totally different, to big enterprise clients, complex buyer networks, navigating through so many different decision makers and building relationships with them. And one of the things we talked about was, whether it's an enterprise sale or not, is those next steps, if they're comfortable and they feel good and they can trust you, it obviously goes to the roof. It's the obvious statement. Where we found it interesting, Mike, was closing the sale. And if the sale is closed, when it comes to that last part of the upfront contract, what happens next? The introductions to the customer service crew, the introductions to whatever it is, whoever's onboarding, someone in a factory or someone in the back end office, what that looks like, because then it's up to the salesperson and the sales leaders, whoever's involved, to provide that bridge. So then the bonding rapport has to continue. If all of a sudden that person doesn't feel comfortable with that next person they're going to deal with, they could just say, you know what, hey, we're going to stay where we are.
Yeah.
The bonding rapport doesn't stop. If all of a sudden it's a totally different interaction with that next person, like, wait, then it's like, hold on, time out. It's such a connected part.
I like that continuance part a lot. And for me, it's really, it does a couple of things. One is, it's like a flashlight or headlights on a highway in the darkness, right? The further you can see out, the more comfortable you are. When you can't see anything and you're in pitch black darkness, nobody is comfortable with that. But it also allows, what I think salespeople miss is they're always trying to move the deal faster. Of course you are. But if you slow it down, it's much easier for the buyer to say they want to speed up than it is for them to say, whoa, 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 slow down. And now you're breaking rapport. Right. And so I think when you put it on them to say, hey, you know what, Chris, I think we can go move faster on this. We're pretty excited about it. And my team's ready to go. Can we set that meeting sooner or can we deal with that right now? Then you're allowing them to go as fast as they're comfortable moving. And it actually speeds up your sale rather than slowing it down, which is crazy.
100%. Absolutely.
Any of the C's we missed, or should we move on to technique and talk about how we actually have this conversation and do these?
I think we hit all the C's. I think maybe I think we hit confusion, right? We talked about that one. And we're the closure is one of the other ones, but that's really around that no, right? Understanding that we can close this thing out and and get along, have a good relationship, and it's okay. And I think rather than just saying, well, throw them out to the field, I'm done with them, right? It's all about relationships.
I'm glad you brought that one back up too, because I had a point there too, where salespeople are afraid to go for the no. They don't want to close this deal. But I love that you mentioned it's not no forever anymore. We used to say, it's no for the next 90 days, and people's worlds change every 90 days. I think post-pandemic, it might be 9 days, or it might be, 3 weeks or so before their world changes, and now they have a need and a new problem. And so I think those no decision cycles have gotten shortened a lot, where you can say, hey, no problem. When do you want me to follow up with you? Or how would you know if things change and this does move up the priority ladder for you, and have that discussion of what the continuance is, even on a no.
I want to share a quick story on that, because I think it's very relative. Because what got us here, everybody, our customers, us, may not get us there, right? And things are changing so fast. I just heard a client the other day talk about the fact they're a major landscaping company, commercial and industrial. And he was talking about, from a bonding rapport standpoint and where they're going, that they went to a conference about a week ago or so, and the amount of AI, artificial intelligence, that's coming into their world, autonomous mowers, a Roomba, like we have a Roomba in our house. Sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't, but Roomba lawnmowers. And so it was about a month or two ago, he was talking to a provider of all those AI, all this AI equipment, and it was very expensive. They really liked the person, they really liked the company, but they said no. Well, now that he's gone to this conference and they're realizing all this stuff and where it's heading, they called him back because they had good bonding rapport and he felt good about it, and they're making a major purchase. So this is probably like a 3-month gap between saying no, learning more information about where the business is headed, calling that same salesperson back and saying yes. I
love that. So let's dive into how we actually set an upfront contract and have this conversation so that we get the benefits of all the stuff we've talked about so far. Yep. Where would you recommend a salesperson start in trying to do this?
Well, it depends on when the interaction starts. It could be an email introduction, then it's a first phone call, and that first phone call, for example, or a Zoom meeting like we're having right now, it could be as simple as, Mike, hey, I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me today. Hey, is it okay if I take 60 seconds, go over a rough agenda as to what we can expect here during this meeting? And really, just from that point right there, right, it's logical. It makes sense. We're not just jumping into this, where we're going. And then when the salesperson can just cover all 5 elements, the purpose of the meeting, why we're meeting today, the time aspect, and really covering that, your agenda, what would you want to make sure we cover today, Mike? What are the different things on your mind? What do you want to make sure that we talk about? And then really get, other customers, prospects, they might ask about this. Is that something you want to talk about? Yes. Here's the questions I'm going to ask you. Again, bonding as we're going through that, because it just makes sense. Then, of course, the outcome. In the very beginning, just stressing the fact in a very nurturing way that this could go one of two potential directions for the most part. One, we take a next step, we talk about what that is at the end of our meeting, or the other is there's no fit to move forward. Maybe not today, it could be down the line, but I want you comfortable telling me that. Again, the nurturing ability. If I looked at you, Mike, hey, we might not be a fit, would you tell me no? I mean, that might be a little direct, right? Depending who it is, but it's like, hey, Mike, if we're not a fit, I'd want you comfortable telling me that. It's just amazing how the bonding rapport can break if I say it differently. Well, we're not a fit for everyone. And you know what? I don't know if we'll be a fit. Then you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah, is he not like me or something?
Right.
I think there is a lot of nuance to this one. And I wanted to talk about the timing of this because we're kind of having an advanced lesson today. What I think the ninja move is being comfortable enough as a salesperson to have this be a conversation. So you're not just delivering an upfront contract and then at the end saying, does that sound good?
Right.
Like you should be comfortable enough asking questions and saying, hey, thanks for inviting me in. What were you hoping we would accomplish today? And let them talk about it. And sometimes it is right up front at the beginning of the meeting. Sometimes people talk. I've had upfront contracts where I asked that first question, what would you like to accomplish? And 30 minutes later, I got to ask the second question because
Right.
this DI leader didn't stop talking, and he laid out everything in his business plan for the next 5 years in those conversations. And that's okay if that's what he wants to accomplish and filling me in and giving me all the backstory of how we got here. I'll take that information. But then I got to go, hey, we have 15 minutes left now in our conversation. Here's some of the things that I would like to accomplish to move our conversation forward. And knowing that upfront contract may take a while. I love what you said too about when you're setting the appointment, you can share upfront contracts, or you can do it in an email before you get on a Zoom call. Right. Or I think all of us that have been practicing Sandler for a while are masters of the barely upfront contract. That's where we totally forgot we had one, or it was a surprise call, or we just got invited in, or a client reached out to us and we go, hey, I'm a little confused. I'm not sure how we got here. Can we call a timeout real quick and take a couple of minutes to make sure we're both aligned on what we're trying to do? And I think all of that is magic. When you realize that what you're trying to do is get to that outcome, you can align wherever it makes sense to align and however long it takes to have that conversation.
And to your point, think about it. I mean, because the upfront contract and bonding through the upfront contract, we're there to determine if there's a fit, if there's pain. And we're talking about a lot of, potentially very serious stuff, depending on what it is, what's going on. And that goes well below the surface level. So we want to make sure that we have an effective and a very meaningful reason for meeting. And then both parties understand where it could go. Because it's serious. It's a serious conversation.
Yeah, I think that's great. I wanted to share one other fun one, which was if you're ever working with somebody else who is Sandler trained, that's my favorite one, because you can just say the words like, hey, what's our upfront contract for this meeting today? And you can both lay it out real quick, put it together. And that's always fun. I love it when our clients reach out to us like that or are selling us stuff and we can make it shorter. It's funny to recognize some of those things, but it doesn't happen as often as it should. I feel like we need some sort of a sales portal, or go in our LinkedIn group and post what you have to sell, so you can, have buyers and sellers from that already know.
Good idea.
Anything else you want to add on upfront contracts today, Chris?
I think from a BAT perspective, the attitude is you deserve accurate and timely decisions, number one. And you deserve to be able to set that upfront contract because it's the right thing to do, and it helps with bonding rapport. I think sometimes there's that when we get hit with something from left field, or maybe we feel that we don't need to do an upfront contract, it feels too formal or whatever it is. Well, I think we all know what could happen when that doesn't happen, but attitudinally, you deserve it.
I like it. Again, thanks for joining us on the podcast. We are speaking with Chris McDonell, a longtime Sandler trainer from Baltimore. And you've been on the podcast before, so I won't give you the regular ones, but I just thought I'd maybe ask you a fun question of what's the next goal for you, or what are you working on right now?
Great question. I want to go on the very important side of smoking meat on a smoker at home. All right, here we go. This is a personal goal here. So I've been doing this for about a year. I've been always wanting to do it. I got my smoker. There's various other folks in the Sandler network. We share just kind of like some pictures of what we're doing and best practices and recipes. I made my first brisket this past Saturday, and I've done so many other things. It was the first one, and I kind of screwed it up. So I was a little disappointing, to say the least. I was hit hard. Now I did have my in-laws over. My wife, my father was like, "Hey, I actually like it." I'm like, "Come on!" But he's like, it just wasn't as good as it was. And this was a 12-hour operation to cook this thing.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the preparation and everything. So a lot of lessons learned with that. So my goal is to go back, get the next brisket here in a couple of weeks, follow what I wrote down and make some changes and tweaks and see where it comes out. So that's my immediate goal.
Well, I will always talk barbecue. I'm from Kansas City, so we'll do that anytime. I can only think of three things you probably already got, right? Slow, low, and make sure there's plenty of moisture. In there.
Absolutely.
Good brisket. All right. How about a favorite Sandler quote, motto, or mantra for upfront contracts? What comes to mind?
I always go back to, if your foot's hurting, you're probably standing on your own toe. I just always go back to that one because it's personal ownership. It starts here and it stops here. So you just got to look down and say, "Oh yeah, that's the reason." Take your foot off and just really take ownership especially for the upfront contract and really for everything we do.
I love that. And that's why I mentioned that barely upfront contract is when you realize in any meeting that it's going off the rails, call a timeout, get off your toe and say, "Hey, can we reset the agenda here and what we're doing?" And I think it's a great lesson and one that everybody can use. So if you enjoyed it, go check out our additional resources at Sandler.com. Like I mentioned, you can find other podcasts on the upfront contract and moving the sale forward as well. Share this with your sales team and have a discussion about it. Get some help. Collect those best practices like we do with barbecue advice here at Sandler. Collect your sales advice with your team. Get that figured out. And then thank you for listening. Remember, whatever you are, be a good one. Go get it done. The How to Succeed podcast is brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training with over 200 locations. More information at Sandler.com. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe to get notified about future sales and leadership videos from Sandler.
The Sandler Summit returns in 2023. Each new event builds exponentially upon the energy and success of the prior year. The 2022 Sandler Summit event was a huge success for everyone who attended, so don't miss the next one. Buy your tickets to the Sandler Summit at Sandler.com/summit.